Welcome back to Gloved Up Garage. In this episode, we're going to run through a couple of things I found after I took this out for a test drive, after I put the car back together. The last video showed you guys I did the fuel pump, the fuel filter, the air pump, all that fun stuff. Took it into town, got some fresh fuel in it, filled it up with about a half a tank of premium, and then hung out and talked to a friend of mine for a little bit that I haven't seen in a while. While I was doing that, I didn't realize the sun was starting to set a little sooner than I anticipated, so on the way home it was a little dark. Luckily, the headlights worked. The bulbs were light enough that it threw a little bit of light out on the road ahead of me. It wasn't completely pitch black dark yet. It was kind of that dusk where the sky's kind of blue. So it wasn't a terrible situation. It was enough to make me just concerned about it. So today I got the headlight housings out and I was looking at the bulbs. I know the housings are a little bit hazed over, and I can polish those up and put some clear on them and clean them up quite a bit, and that'll help. But the bulbs that were in there were actually 9004 bulbs. So the Crown Vics, Grand Marquis, Lincoln Town Cars, Marauders, all of those, they take a 9007 bulb. It's a little bit different from a 9004, and I also found that a couple of the wires were twisted around different over here on this passenger side headlight harness. And I guess that's just to compensate for the difference between the two bulbs. But I fixed that and put the 9007 bulbs in. Really impressed with the light output for just what they are. That'll get me by until I can afford new headlights. And when I do the new headlights, I'm actually going to do something pretty cool. There's a company called Morimoto that makes LED projector conversions. And essentially you just kind of go in here and gut this housing. You take that reflector out of the back right in there, and then you basically take your bulb out. You have to heat your headlight housing up and then separate the lens from the housing so you can get in there and do all that stuff. But the LED projector just kind of drops into the hole that the headlight comes through, the headlight bulb comes through. And then you just tighten it down on the back side. You put your cap back on, you get all your wiring squared away. And it's high-low beam. Both beams are in there. It's just a much better output of light and a much more concentrated output of light than these older style headlight housings. So that'll come in the future. That'll be a good video to do. I'll show you step by step on how to do that. One of the things I did notice last night is I only had one fog light. My passenger side fog light was working. My driver's side was not. So there's an access panel on the bottom of the bumper. I reached up in there, and the back side of the fog light housing was just laying back there, and the bulb with the harness was just laying off to the side. You can see this thing's had some water in it. So what happens is this is actually a glass lens and then a metal housing. The seal between the two dries up and fails and leaks water in and separates, and so it causes a big mess. And somewhere along the line, the bulb, there's an O-ring on this bulb that's supposed to be right there in that groove, and it's gone. So I don't know if the water pushed it out, if it just fell out, whatever the case may be, but you can see how easy that is. So that may have let water in too. I'm going to see if I can find some temporary housings. Those are the same as like the 03, 04 Cobras. I think some of the Escapes use the same fog light housing, and then I'll order up a new set of bulbs and get those swapped out. Morimoto actually makes a conversion fog light and LED as well, but they're about $230, $250. So somewhere in that area. I just can't afford that right now. I'd rather get the headlights taken care of before I worry about the fog lights. They just don't put out that much light for me to be really concerned. Eventually, I'd like them both to match, so that's why I would go ahead and do both. But that's where I'm at for now. I've gone ahead and swapped out the bulbs in the headlights. I'm going to bolt the headlights back in. And then once it gets dark tonight, I'll take it back out for a ride. Probably pull it out of the garage and aim these headlights just a little bit. It seemed like one of them was a little high. I believe the passenger side was high and the driver's side was low, or it might be vice versa. But once you get in front of a garage door, you can kind of measure everything out and go from there. So I'll worry about that later. Otherwise, car did great. Drove fine, shifted fine, went through all the gears, downshifted great. Didn't feel any slips on the transmission, no noise from the rear end. So we put about, I'm gonna say 15, 20 miles on it. I'm gonna come back here and check this wheel. I haven't looked at it to see if there's any grease leaking out. And there's no grease back there. It looks pretty clean. So I'm gonna say at this point, we're probably gonna be okay to hold off on doing that axle seal until later this year when I plan to change gears. I think I'm going to go ahead and put 410s in this, and when I do it, I need to get a tune, which will kind of help. The transmission I'm not real happy with. It's not slipping or anything. I'm just used to a tune on the transmission and the way that shifts, and it feels like some of the line pressure is up. And I don't know if somebody's been in this thing before me as far as the tune goes, but I just want something a little different on that trans tune. But again, to do the gears, you got to do a tune to optimize it. So that'll be something we do in the future. But that's pretty much it for now. I'll get to work on getting these headlights back in. Maybe I'll do a little video of driving this thing later tonight with the new headlights in, and taking them down the road a little bit. All right, so you can see I've got the headlights aimed up here on the front of my garage. This is not as bad as I thought it was. It must have just been how bad those bulbs were, but this is pretty good. I don't know what the exact procedure is. It's about 12, maybe 10 feet back away from the door. Maybe I ought to be a little closer. I'm not really sure. Basically, I thought that these things were going to be so far off it would be really apparent. But honestly, it's not that bad. The driver's side looks like it might be a hair taller than the passenger side, so I'll bring the passenger side up just a smidge and then go out here on the road and see what it looks like. Well, I've put about 60 miles on the car since last night. Took it out for a drive this morning, washed it up a little bit, went back and forth between one small town to another. They're about 15 miles apart. Did that a couple of times. Car drives fine, feels great, pedals good on the brake, acceleration's good. I do have a small leak in the AC system, which I'll have to address that. Basically, the low side port's got a little leak to it, and I'm gonna probably just top off the refrigerant until the end of the season, and then I'll go ahead and fix that and the high side ports at the same time. The refrigerant detector that I have picked up a little bit on both ports, but I knew the low side was leaking. I can't see a visible leak on the high side, but you can actually see the low side leaking a little bit. So I'll just top it off to get me through the next month or so of summer, and then I'll address it this winter. So what I'm going to do now, you can tell the hood on this thing is really, really dull. It's almost like something sitting on the surface. And over here on this spot, you can see up here in the front, it's pretty shiny. And I did this by hand with just some polishing compound. Just hit it to see if that stuff would come off, and it shined pretty much right up, at least to what I would consider acceptable. So my next step is I bought a polishing pad from Harbor Freight. Again, I didn't really want to spend a whole lot of money on this because, well, it's a budget, and I really can't afford to have it detailed professionally, and for $200 or $300, and then eventually I'd like to have it ceramic coated, but for now, this is just gonna have to do. So, got my old trusty Black & Decker polisher. I converted it over to the Harbor Freight hook and loop back, and then I used their polishing pad. So, I'm gonna hit this with some Meguiar's polishing compound, and then see what it looks like. And if it leaves a bunch of swirl marks, it's gonna look better than it does right now. So, this is the starting point. I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like before I got started. And you can see it's dull. There's some water streaks and stuff on it. So hopefully, this will come out and look pretty good. I don't know. We'll find out. So hang in there. I'm going to get this first step done, and then I'll come right back. All right, so check this out. Just after a few minutes of polishing, and I'm just using some Mother's number 2 cleaner. Nothing crazy. It's not perfect, but man, does it look better. I'm gonna pop the hood up so I can get these edges and then run over here onto the fenders. It's still a little cloudy right there where you can see the light and the reflection. And now you're really starting to pick up on the hail damage that's on the hood too, which I knew that going in, so that's why I wasn't overly concerned. If I burn through the paint, I gotta go through and fix this hail damage somehow anyway, so you can kind of see the reflection there. Right in here in this area, there's a lot of hail damage on the hood. If I can get this thing to come back, I think I'm going to look into paintless dent repair, see what we've got out here in the area. May need to run it to another shop up in Louisville. I know a couple of good places in Louisville that do PDR, so I don't know. We'll see how this turns out. I'll keep going, and I'm going to pop the hood and finish polishing this. Grab the upper edges of the fenders, and I don't know, see where it gets us. Stay tuned. All right, so that's the first part of the polishing process complete, and it looks much better than it did. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of oxidation over here on the passenger side of the hood. That may come out with polishing. I'm not a detail expert. You guys let me know if it'll come out or not. I believe I'll have to wet sand that and then buff it in order to get that oxidation out of the clear. It may work, it may not. For now, I'm happy where I'm at. I wanted to get that dull stuff off the hood. It's much shinier than it was, but the more shiny it gets, the more those hail dents really start to stand out. So for now, this is good. This is where I wanted to take it to. I'll come back over this at another date, probably a little later this year, and I'll finish this up with some swirl mark remover and then some actual wax and polish. So this is where I wanted to be. This is good for now. I'm happy with it. We got the lights done. We've got this cleaned up. We got new tires on it. All of the lights are working. And the next step I need to do is go get this inspected by my local sheriff. When you bring a vehicle in from out of state into Kentucky, there's a little inspection that they have to do. Basically, they're just going to go through and inspect to make sure that the headlights and the brights work. They're going to make sure that your turn signals work. They're going to make sure that the horn and the windshield wipers work. Excuse me. All of those things work on this vehicle with no issues now. We've got good headlights. We've got turn signals. We've got brakes. And all of those lights are working. So I'll take this and get it inspected soon, and then that way I'll be able to get a Kentucky tag on the vehicle, be able to get registration. I've already got insurance on it. I had that since it landed here, so no worries about that. And I'm going to call that pretty much done for now. We're back on the road. That'll be the last official step of getting it roadworthy, is getting a license plate and a tag for the vehicle, but we're roadworthy. This car runs, it drives, it stops. Suspension feels pretty decent. Eventually, I know I'm going to need control arm bushings, ball joints, and stuff like that, but for now, it's fine. It doesn't, there's no wandering when you're out on the road. It's not, there's nothing that indicates that there's any kind of wear components that need to be changed. So we are good for now. We're roadworthy. So now is the point where we can start to do some upgrades, some modifications, and just enjoy the car for what it is. So with that being said, this part of the process of making the car roadworthy is complete, and from here on out, you'll see this in and out of the videos as I do upgrades, as I change things. Like we're going to do a little badge delete on this grill here. We'll get new headlights and new corner lights, and we'll upgrade all that stuff to LED, new LED fog lights, but those will come further down the road. I'll do videos on those as well. I actually want to do one more video on this before I completely sign off on it. But one of the subscribers had asked about fixing the door panel on these vehicles and the process that I did to fix the door panel. So right now I just had to put a new window switch in. That one failed on me. So I will go through and I'll explain how I repaired this step by step when I do the passenger side over there. And yeah, you can see a little peek of something I've got planned there in the passenger seat. And we'll go over that. I still got to clean the interior. Otherwise, completely done. It's driving, it's running, it's exactly where I want it to be. And for now, it's good. So thank you guys all for watching. Thanks for the subscribes. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll know when we upload new videos. Make sure to hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when those videos are uploaded. Make sure to leave us a comment and a like. Thank you guys. Catch you on the next one.